somebody asked me for a pretty speaker, and after the Swedish girl we had, I've got another one. Sarah's going to tell us all about biodegradable rubbish. Not that I'm saying anything about my speech, but I had this honour of presenting Sarah Mills, and she's going to give us a talk.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Ron, for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for inviting me to your meeting here. Is here the best place for me to? So you're all happy if I speak from here. So just to introduce myself again, my name is Sarah Mills, and I come from the Recycle for Your Community campaign. Recycle for Your Community is the local recycling and waste minimisation campaign for East London, and by East London I not only mean Havering, where we are here, but also Barking and Dagenham, Redbridge and Newham. I've come here today to speak to you about waste and recycling, but particularly about the way that we process our waste here in East London, because it is quite unusual and I hope quite interesting. I do have some notes which I won't read from, but do forgive me if I refer to them. What I'll probably start off by doing is to give you a bit of a potted history of waste, both kind of here in East London and also more widely than that. And then I'll go on to talk about the actual processes that we use to manage that waste. So as I mentioned, when I talk about waste here in East London, I mean these 4 boroughs. They're Barking and Dagenham, Havering, Newham and Redbridge. And I speak of these 4 together because they're all governed by the same waste authority. So each region of Greater London and also nationwide is governed by a waste authority, and here it's the East London Waste Authority. The East London Waste Authority is responsible for dealing with and managing all of our waste, our household recycling and our household rubbish as well. And they have commissioned the charity that I work for a charity called Wastewatch, who are based in central London. We're an environmental charity, and they've commissioned us to come in and do their community engagement work. So we're a team of 4 people, and we work with schools, residents associations, as groups as yourselves, just to try and talk as much as we can about waste and recycling and make sure everybody knows what's happening here. So here in East London we have about 1 million residents, and in a year we'll produce about 500,000 tonnes of waste, and that's, I'm sure you'll agree, an awful lot. That's about half a tonne a person a year. And that's just household as well. We're not talking about trade waste or anything else. Traditional ways of managing waste have been to landfill. I don't know if many people have seen any of our landfill sites around here. This area has actually got quite a few landfill sites, although many of them are full now. Landfill is not a very efficient way of disposing with our waste, both in terms of the volume. In fact, we're running out of space very quickly to landfill our waste, but it's actually very expensive as well. So if we were to landfilling a tonne of waste is rated at £64 at the moment, just in landfill tax. And on top of that, there are additional fees and other kinds of charges associated with that. So that rate of £64 a tonne goes up every year by £8. So next year it will be 72, and after that it will be 80. And if you think that we're producing 500,000 tonnes of waste per year times by 64, and that's just in the tax. That doesn't have to do with the cost of collecting all of our waste, of the handling of it, the management of it, or anything like that. So there's the expense associated with the landfill, but there's also the environmental concerns. And I mean, I am coming from an environmental organisation, so this is see our perspective on it. But landfill destroys habitats, it creates methane, and it's just not a sustainable way of doing things. So with that as a background to our waste here in East London, really that we have to find other ways to process and manage our waste here. And in 2002, the East London Waste Authority entered into a contract with Shanks East London, who you may have heard of. They're a waste contractor, similarly to Biffa and Veolia and other waste management contractors like that you may see around London. We have Shanks. So Shanks came in 2002, and the first thing they did was to refurbish our recycling centres. So we have 4 recycling centres here in East London, one in each of our boroughs. Here in Havering we have Gherkins Lane, or some people say Jerkins. But we also have Frislands in Barking and Dagenham, Chigwell Road in Redbridge, and then there's Jenkins Lane in Barking and Dagenham. So each borough has their own recycling centre, and I have brought with me actually some guides on our recycling centres, because any of the residents of any of these boroughs can visit any of the recycling centres. You don't have to go to the one in Havering, and if you're a Newham resident, you don't have to go to the one in Newham. They're all free for all of us to use, and you can take an awful lot of things there. So you can take fridges, freezers, garden furniture, wood, paint, oil, tyres, electrical equipment, all sorts of things that you might not know. They can all go to the recycling centre and they'll be recycled there. So refurbishing the recycling centres and making them fit for purpose was one of the things Shanks did when they came in. And another thing was to install 2 what are called biomass, and that they are biological materials recovery facilities. I'm sure I get that one. And we have one at Frog Island, which isn't too far from me. It's just south of here in Rainham, which you may know of, and the other one is at Jenkins Lane, which is where my office is based. So if I go on to talk about recycling first and then waste, because they're processed very differently and in a way you might not know about. So from our households here, our household recycling, we have the orange bags. Does everyone familiar with the orange bags? And in those we can put all plastic bottles, tins and cans, and paper and thin card. We don't put anything else in the orange bags. It's just those 3 items. And when they are collected from your doorstep, they're all taken to the Jenkins Lane waste management facility, just in Beckton. When they arrive, the bags are all brought in by lorry, and they're brought into a chamber where they're opened, and they're all put onto a series of conveyors that take them round sort of a mechanical sorting machine that's enormous. So the materials are sorted both by machine and by hand. There are people in there, and if I just talk about the way that works, as they come in to be sorted, all of the material is seen by hand first. So we have employees there who are standing on the conveyor belts and pulling out everything that is obviously contamination. So large dry items that should never have been in the recycling bag, they get pulled off straight away. They then go through a conveyor and they go through some what are called V screens, which are vibrating screens in the shape of a V that take the paper off. It's then brought through under magnets and eddy current separators, which take off the steel and the aluminium cans. And then at the end, the plastic bottles are sorted by hand into type 1 and type 2. Once all of those materials are separated, they are put into bales. So we have baling machines at the recycling centre, which bale all of the paper together, all of the tins and cans together, all of the bottles together, and they are then sent on for reprocessing. And if you do go down to the recycling centre, which you are free to do, you can see it all happening. You can see the bales lined up outside my office window. you can wave at me from there. So that's how our recycling is sorted. But the more interesting process is that of the refuse. So the Frog Island Waste Management Facility, I don't know if anybody's seen it, it's just off the Rainham Road, just south of here. It's relatively new technology, and it's not technology that's widely used in the UK. And it's really quite an interesting process. So all of our household waste is brought in again by lorry, and it's distributed in the same way. It's brought into a big kind of a cavernous facility there, and everything is immediately shredded. So all of our waste, absolutely all of our household refuse and more actually, is all put through a shredding machine that shreds everything down to about a 300mm size. And that has the effect of both opening the bags, if all of our rubbish is going in black bags, it opens the bags, and it also exposes all of our refuse to the air. And this is quite an important process because one of the problems with our waste is that when it biodegrades, it produces methane and other harmful gases and odours as well. So one of the things Shanks is trying to do is manage it in a way that reduces all of those risks. So once all of our material is shredded, it's exposed to the air and it's craned into what's called a bio-drying floor. The bio-drying floor is in a separate facility where all of our shredded waste is laid out and air is drawn through it. And the air that's drawn through is drawn onto the roof of the building where they've got sort of a series of wood chip bays which removes some of the harmful gases and removes the odour from our waste as it biodegrades. So as it dries out there, one of the benefits of it drying out, removing that moisture, is it reduces the volume quite significantly. It reduces the volume of our waste by up to 25%. So if we're thinking about tonnages of waste and trying to manage 500,000 tonnes of waste and potentially sending it to landfill, just by drying it all out down at Frog Island, we've already reduced that by 25%, which is great. So after 14 days on the bio-drying floor, the waste is then craned back into to be shredded again. So it gets shredded to much smaller, what are called fines. And once the fines have been shredded into this kind of smaller situation, they are then sent through a similar conveyor belt kind of facility as the recycling. And again, there are magnets and there are eddy current separators that pull away the metals that may have been in your rubbish. They go through a trommel machine, which is a rotating drum with holes in the side bit, which pull out materials of different sizes. The glass and the stones are removed. And what's left is called solid recovered fuel. So SRF, the solid recovered fuel, makes up about 50% of our waste once we have removed the metals and we've removed the glass and stones. The metals that we've removed are sent to be used in industry and recycled again. The glass and stones are used in the construction industry, in road surfacing, in the concrete industry. And the solid recovered fuel that we're left with, we actually use as a fuel. We don't burn it ourselves, we don't have incineration here, but the solid recovered fuel is used as an alternative to fossil fuels. It burns at has a very high calorific value. So that the 50% is used as fuel. About 11.5% is glass and stones that's reused in construction. About 13.5% is the metals, which again is recycled. We're left with a compostable fraction, which is about 10%. And Shanks are looking at ways to be able to compost not only the waste that they get through from households, but also the green garden waste. And they should be doing that to sell that back to residents of East London, which is a really great closed loop. The closed loop kind of recycling is the ideal way of doing it. So that's not, they're still working on that at the moment, but we're hoping that that's going to come along quite soon. And then, as I say, that the 25% is the moisture that we've already lost through the process of that. So after all of this process, the interesting thing about this is that we're actually sending very little to landfill here in East London, very little indeed. And Shanks themselves have a target of diverting 64% of all of our waste by 2015 and recycling 32%. Now at the moment we're diverting 69, so we've already beaten the target, although our recycling is down at about 24 at the moment. So although we have a very good way of managing our refuse, we still have some way to go with the recycling. Now I know that wasn't quite a 20 or 25 minute talk. I did have some slides to bring you, which unfortunately I didn't bring a projector with me to be able to do so. But does anybody have any questions at this stage about the... Yes.
Jim first, over there.
Yeah, I spent a number of years in the recycling industry myself. It's impressive to hear some of the steps that have been made, appear to be made. I still question why we don't go back to the source or the cause. Governments have said they're going to do this. Packaging is horrible. You buy a small product and the packaging is 6 times the size of it. You get it thrown through your door every day, which goes straight from the front door into the yellow bag.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What's going wrong?
Absolutely.
Why don't people getting the real
Absolutely, and that's one of the things. It's actually quite rare for me to come and speak to a group just about the recycling facilities, and it's been very, very nice to be able to do so, because a lot of the work we do is still just trying to get people to recycle from home in the first place. And on top of that, really, once we're looking at the solution to all of our waste, it's already gone too far. What we really should be doing as a society is really addressing our consumption at the, you know, as consumers, and at the beginning of the process. You know, we can't just focus on the end of pipe solution to all of our waste. What we really need to be thinking about is why we're producing it in the first place. So the waste hierarchy really is having disposal right at the bottom. That really is the last resort, and right at the top we should be, well, reducing firstly, but secondly reusing all of our things, mending our things. Which has a lot to do with skills these days as well. You know, people don't know how to fix their bikes, or how to mend their clothes, or how to sew a button on, or how to use their old jars for chutney. You know, that kind of thing. It's people aren't doing that kind of thing so much anymore, and that's one of the things we're trying to talk to people about more often. So it's reducing our consumption, reusing what we
really
can,
what you're saying is
and then recycling the rest.
There is no effort to reduce it.
So. There are the government directives. Unfortunately, there was a waste review which took out all of the targets for local authorities to meet, which is really unfortunate for the sector. But there is a voluntary agreement called the Courtauld Agreement, which is being run by the Waste and Resources Action Programme, who are a sort of associated government arm. And the Courtauld Agreement is sort of a voluntary commitment for manufacturers and, in fact, high street retailers who sign up to a commitment to reduce their waste from their side. And perhaps about a year ago, there were adverts on the television from companies like Robinson's and Sainsbury's as well, talking about their bottles and how they're using thinner plastic bottles and thinner glass bottles, and that concentrated liquids are becoming more concentrated, so that you buy a smaller bottle and have the same usage out of it. And this is all as a product of them signing up to the Courtauld Agreement. It's not always very visible to us as consumers that the big supermarkets are doing this. They don't tend to talk about it very much, and it's a mystery to me as to why not. But actually Sainsbury's, about a year ago as well, was taken to court for over-packaging a certain cut of meat that they had was wrapped in 3 different types of plastic, and they were taken to court by the Food Standards Agency, who just deemed it irresponsible and unnecessary. And there are more and more instances of this, you know, coming up into the public eye, where people are starting to realise, and companies are starting to react to that. They realise that people don't want all this packaging. We don't necessarily want the single-use plastic bags. We don't want all that polystyrene. We can't do anything with it. So it's slow, but hopefully it's getting there.
Right.
That's a very long response, sorry.
Sarah, I remember some years ago, used to be outside Avely, a long pipe that was burning off methane from one of the landfills. Has that been utilised at all, the methane gas side?
I don't know, I'm afraid. No, I don't know. I don't know who owns the landfill sites, and I don't know who manages them. I'm afraid I don't know. I can certainly try and find out.
It would be a useful source of energy.
I think the one he's referring to is the Sandy Lane one, isn't it? They do in fact harness some of that methane.
Do they?
Well, they burn off, they do harness it, and they do use it, they do recycle it. It's not an easy process to do that. But a couple of questions. I did actually see the plant being built.
Oh, you did?
Very late, and it is quite extraordinary, I must say, having seen that. I know that there was a lot of concern at one time, particularly from the Fire Authority, on the drying shelves, where you're getting off the moisture. You're also getting off methane gas, aren't you? And you're taking those through the wood chips on the top. They were very concerned that you had a very highly combustible situation building up there.
Right.
Have you had any problems with fires on that?
No.
You
No, not to my knowledge. And again, I don't work for Shanks themselves, although we work very closely with them. I can. There's nothing that I've heard of to do with that, and I know that they are very, very safety conscious.
Yeah, the fire brigade didn't worry about anything, but they were very worried about it. Yeah, the other thing, when they were producing the pellets, which is the fuel element which comes out, there was a rumour going around that they was in production, they were landfilling the pellets. Now, are they in fact being used for the purposes of combustion now.
Yeah, they certainly are.
They certainly were initially being landfill, weren't they?
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, once once they've processed this waste and they've got the end of it, they've got the metals and they've got the hard plastics and they've got the solid recovered fuel. Beyond that, it's then very market driven. So if they can't find a buyer for the solid recovered fuel, they are then stuck with it. So it may have been to begin with, they just couldn't find enough people who would take it up.
They had to burn it. The idea was power stations, of course, that was the initial, whether...
Yeah. And I certainly wouldn't say that they always get rid of all of it, and some of it, we do have to send some things to landfill. But at the moment, we're sort of pulling the streams away that are going quite easily. So.
But it is quite an extraordinary facility.
Yeah, it certainly is. And in fact, we used to run tours, but we're not able to anymore, which is a real shame because it's such an interesting place. Yeah.
I wonder if I could raise 2 points quickly. They will be quick. One is that there appears to be no saving of foodstuffs. If I go to other areas, and this has been part of their saving of waste for years.
Yeah.
Yet here, nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and what would be ideal is that if at the doorstep we all separated all of our different materials, and that's a controversial thing sometimes. I know that some councils outside of London, that there's uproar because people have sort of 6 or 7 different bins, and some people don't want that. But food waste is actually a huge amount of what we throw away. It takes up a huge proportion of our household waste. And if we can separate it at home, well, I mean, if we can use all of our food, but if we can separate our food waste at home and send it separately to be treated, that's ideal. But unfortunately, here at Shanks don't have the facility to be able to. You need an anaerobic digester for food waste, and we don't have one of them. So, and that's not to say that they might not ever, but again, that's for them to develop their facilities.
Well, Ambridge had one about 3 years ago. The Archers.
Yes.
The Archers on the radio, they had an anaerobic digester about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Second question. I have a question. Yeah. The second question was that you gave an impression that it is very easy, in fact, to go from one local authority's waste disposal area to another. In fact, it isn't. For example, if you go into the Gherkins Lane dump, there you have to show your council tax.
Proof of residence.
And if you don't, you'll be allowed to go in at a charge.
I can tell you why because they introduced that relatively recently, and it was because they were having a really big problem with people coming in from neighbouring boroughs, and in fact trade waste. So traders coming in their own personal cars and just bringing in as much as they could process, because other people have to pay for their waste, and in fact it's actually very expensive to process waste. It's an expensive business. So to keep it free for residents, we have to make sure that we are all residents. So that's why they ask you to prove that you live here, so that they can allow you to come in and take, dump and recycle as much as you like.
So there is free trade. You were suggesting there's free trade between different authorities, but there isn't.
Oh, there is, yeah. If you go to a different recycling centre, but also take your council tax to show proof of address, to show that you are a resident of East London, then indeed they will let you in.
That's not known, I think, at all, right?
Yeah.
We've read over the last few years about action with animal type project stuff, when bugs or maggots or whatever they are. Break it all down so that it becomes a sort of mulch.
Right.
Is that being carried on or what?
It's not. I only know of that in very small scale garden situations. Do you mean sort of like a wormery?
Yes.
Yeah, but on a large scale. It's not something I've heard of, and to my knowledge, it's not something that Shanks are looking into in this area.
And that would answer the food problem.
But yes, it would. Yeah, it would. Or we could all have wormeries in our back garden, which would also.
They taste delicious.
Mr. President,
I was going to ask something. I spend a little bit of time in Spain, and Spain's recycling record is better than the UK, which is surprising when you look at the size of the country. And I think one of the reasons is that disposal facilities are a lot more frequent. Where I am, I can guarantee you I have to walk no more than 200 yards and there will be bottles, plastic, cardboard and paper, and your general household waste. And also there are other areas where you can take all your green rubbish. And they are a lot more frequent than they are here.
We won't walk 200 yards.
And they also banned plastic bags over a year ago in supermarkets. We're a backward country.
Michael, may I suggest that's probably the region you're in, because I also have a place in Spain and it has nothing like what you've got.
You've got nothing like that?
Nothing. It's just starting to come in the south.
I've got a couple of responses quickly. So, oh, have I got time?
Yes.
Have I? I'll be very quick. Okay. Firstly, I also, just out of interest, I also lived in Spain, and at the bottom of it, everywhere I went, there was on-street recycling. So it depends where you are as to how they do it. But they do it in Islington. They do it in some borough councils here in London as well, where you'll just have one big bin that's separated within it. Redbridge, which is one of our boroughs here in East London, you know, under the Waste Authority, they have started doing some on-the-go, they call it on-the-go recycling. But the problem with that actually at the moment is contamination. People just see a bin and throw something in it, and then you're stuck with bins that you set aside for recycling that are full of food waste. So although, I mean, I would love to see that come in, and I think it probably will come in, there are problems with this in. And just quickly about single-use plastic bags as well. The charity I work for, Wastewatch, we've actually just become part of Keep Britain Tidy. And Keep Britain Tidy are running a really big they're calling it Ban the Bag Habit campaign about single-use carry bags, because they are so damaging and we use so many of them. So do sign up to the campaign, because they're taking it to government, and it really is a very important.
Can I just ask one final question to finish this off? Why does this need a charity to be involved? Shouldn't it be promoted by central government? Why does your organisation exist as a charity?
Okay, so Wastewatch is a wider organisation that works on urban sustainability and waste in its various means. Shanks, when they were brought in to manage our waste here, they had an in-house team of community engagement people, community engagement and education people. That their team actually dissolved, and they have contracted us as Wastewatch to go in and do their work for them. So we're just part of the waste sector here in East London, doing the community engagement and education side of things on behalf of Shanks.
So you exist by them employing you rather than
yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's a fascinating talk. Actually, we could have gone on for ages, but we need to draw it to a conclusion. And Jacek, could you please give us a vote of thanks?
Thank you, Mr. President. Sarah, it's so easy to create waste, and to dispose it correctly can be quite complicated. But your explanation this afternoon has made it slightly clearer to us how the system is working. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of everybody for coming in.
Thank you very much. Is there any other business, fellows?